so many people just go through life not actually engaging with what they're doing, with what they're listening to, what they're consuming.
So, Eddie,
Yeah.
tell us about yourself.
Tell us about yourself.
Yes.
Tell you about me.
Yes.
My name is Eddie. I am 30 years old. And I think of myself as just an all-round creative person. I do mostly illustration and graphic design, but branching out into writing comics and doing some product design and just doing a lot of experimentation at the moment. First of all, it's very difficult to determine what is or isn't authentic.
Fair.
I said, like, for many years, I've always thought that my tendency to just produce lines, because I think when I'm drawing or when I'm like making composition, I always just like think in lines. And lines in flat colors, but mostly lines. But for me, that's always felt very naive, because it always like just produces, what it is, lines and flat colors. And I've always tried to aspire to be either more detailed or more technical or more like nuanced, or, learn a style, copy it, kind of make it my own, and then maybe do it for like 1 or 2 projects, and then I drop it because it's not coming from inside me. It's just something it's a mask that I put on. But now I realize that actually when I look at other people's work, whose work is just lines and flat colors, that I admire their work because I think it's nice that they can follow their own instinct. It's made me realize that probably I should be able to also then make work in a way that feels instinctive to me, and also learn to like that. So for me, authenticity has gone from just being okay with experimenting and trying out different things to wanting more actively to figure out what I want or what I like doing. When it comes to real creativity, it's almost difficult to point at what isn't identity, because it all has to come from somewhere, and it all has to come from me. So if in this sense, a lot of people would even argue, is there such a thing as identity? Because we're all just fluid and we're all just changing constantly, and there's no such thing as a fixed identity. But if you see my identity as the sum of all the things that I've experienced, or the things like from my upbringing and things, then I think that a lot of, I don't even know. Almost all of everything is informed by everything that came before it. Being a biracial person, mother Indonesian, Dutch father, growing up in neither of those places, I've always felt like an outsider, and still growing up in these Western contexts of going to a Dutch school and then a British school and then a Dutch-British, or at least international university. I've always had this pressure of, well, this is the norm, this is the paradigm, and I'm going to try to fit myself in it, so at least I can identify with that part of this broader community, and maybe actively or inactively distantiate myself from other sensibilities, whether it's aesthetic sensibilities or cultural sensibilities or religious or like food or anything like that. So for a long time I had this feeling that the European way was the right way. And it's only recently that I've started coming to terms with the fact that actually it's caused me quite a lot of stress, like just subconsciously, like reflecting on my identity. Like, it doesn't feel like my taste is being dictated, but intellectually I kind of know that it has to be, because it doesn't make sense for me in the context that I grew up in to have this much of a Western taste, to have this strong of a preference for these kinds of like aesthetics. Because I did have I did have a lot of exposure to like Indonesian culture, just world cultures, like growing up in Nigeria, like the vibrance and the vibrancy and the colorfulness and the texture and the like the patterns of the fabrics that they use there in clothing. I love that. You know, I think it's beautiful. But it's like, I love it in a way that I put it away from myself. I put it in a box over there. And then if I feel like I start identifying with it, then it creates this tension where I wonder, and it's not necessarily the tension of like appropriation. It's a tension of, am I supposed to like this? Like, is this what I'm supposed to like? So that's kind of where I'm finding myself in the balance. I've always had a very complicated relationship with like the traditional Indonesian batik fabric, which is this very intricate, like very beautifully patterned and designed and very meaningful fabric, which I look at it and I think it's beautiful. And then again, like this feeling comes up where, actually the brown is a little bit too like muted for my sensibilities. Like it reminds me more of dead leaves than it does of like the vibrant Aegean Sea or something. So I have this very complicated view where I can acknowledge that I think it's beautiful, but at the same time I have all of this baggage from my European perspective that doesn't allow me to find it beautiful in a way that I could actually wear it. And then recently, this spring, I was cycling through the forest and I came across this like grouping, like a little, I guess you would call like a copse of juneberry trees that were in bloom. And the bloom of the juneberry tree it's like creamish, it's like a very creamy off-white color, and the leaves are brown. And it's almost exactly the coloration of like traditional batik. I felt it in this like completely uninhibited, unguarded way. Like I could really feel like this is beautiful. And so then I thought like, how can I think that this is beautiful and then have an association with something that is for me so like problematic? And if the one is beautiful, then surely by association, this other thing should also be beautiful to me. And so then I decided to do a little, like, let's call it photographic therapy. If I could take this thing that is beautiful to me and combine it in a way with this other thing which should be beautiful to me in a way that makes a pleasing whole. So if I could unify all of these things in one composition, then I could prove to myself, or I could start believing that actually all of the individual parts are beautiful in their own right. It comes together with this idea of just like, what do you call it? Intersectionality, you know, where things can be multiple things. And I think a lot of people just struggle with that idea that something can be both, like, you know.
But I feel like
you can be both basic and extra. Like that's a thing.
That's true.
This longing for wanting to love ornament is actually the reaction, and what is inside me is this more like essentialist, more structuralist approach. But I think I've just never been able to be honest with myself about which is which. You know, I've always felt like, this has been pushed to the background for whatever reason, and this has been pushed to the foreground for these like academic or like status or
cultural
like,
capitalism.
Cultural, hegemonic reasons, what it's supposed to be. Like maybe it'll turn out that I just only like batik as like a concept and it doesn't have to become a part of me. But But that's something that I want to figure out, like, for myself, instead of it just feeling like something that is being imposed on me. Putting myself in between these images. So we have this image, which is Dutch. I mean, the Juneberry tree and the way that it's positioned here in this forest and the landscaping, etc. It's very Dutch. And then we have this fabric, which is very Indonesian. And then, you know, we have the me. I'm the medium. I'm the thing that is mediating this whole experience, this whole identity crisis. So it just made sense to just put myself in the middle. I can unite these things which feel very disparate to me and make something cohesive, and maybe in doing that I can make myself more cohesive. I think my biggest advice would be copy to practice. Don't copy when you're actually making things. Like, you know, I think a lot of people get obsessed with an end result, especially if you're like trying to emulate someone's style. You just like, you have a lot of references and you sit down and you try to copy them as accurately or as faithfully as possible. And then you're just constantly looking for inspiration. You're constantly looking for things to emulate. And in doing so, you lose track of what's inside you a little bit, and you stop listening to it because you're only listening to what other people are saying or other people's input. Like a big part of what creativity is becoming for me is doing this, like accepting that, you know, my brain is a certain way, I am a certain way, apparently I have an inclination towards lines and flat colors. You know, what is the harm in accepting that and then leaning into it and trying to figure out if that can go somewhere unexpected for me, instead of constantly chasing this ideal that someone else has created, which is completely unrealistic for me to chase because it's just not in me. I'm like super hyper fixated on song lyrics. I cannot listen to music without listening to the words. There are people who can just listen to music and not care what is being said. So for once I was in an office. I used to work in an office, and there were 5 people in this office with me, and there was this album on repeat for like a whole day, and no one was catching on. And by the 4th round, I was saying, why are we listening to this like lactose intolerance song for the 4th time? And they were literally like, they had the gall to like turn to me and say, lactose intolerance? What are you talking about? Because one of the songs was about how a girl was being cheated on by her like boyfriend, and he had ordered cake, but it was one with dairy and she was lactose intolerant. So, because that's how she knew that her man was cheating on her.
I didn't think that was literal.
It was so literal. But they had literally listened, this album had been on in the office, on and off for a month, and none of them had stopped to listen to what was being said. Until I had said, why the hell are we listening to this lactose intolerant song?